Jennifer Moore is a professor of law at the University of New Mexico School of Law. Thanks for joining us this week.
Thank you, Megan. Great to be here.
First, let's start with some basics. What makes a refugee different from an immigrant when it comes to legal definitions?
So in terms of legal definitions, an immigrant is somebody who comes into a country with an intention to stay there, at least in the medium term, whereas a refugee is somebody who flees in fear of persecution, which is a serious human rights violation. So someone who flees a fear of death or harm to themselves or their family, torture, rape, or serious discrimination and other violations of human rights. So refugees, their flight is motivated by fear, and that is the principal reason that they seek entry into a country.
How does the definition of family under this context fit into this?
So in terms of family, really you can't separate the word family from immigrant or family from refugee. One of my concerns about the current treatment of immigrants at the border is that we really punish immigrants for having families. Refugees have families and immigrants have families. And our laws have always, to some extent, both treated family members unfairly and also honored family members. So in our best times, historically, we have had very generous definitions of the family and recognizing that immigrants can bring at least their immediate family. And for refugees, if an individual applies for asylum, their spouse and children are included in their asylum application, and they would never be separated from the principal applicant. In some cases, all members of the family have claims that would be independent, but they aren't asked to apply individually.
For asylum.
And one individual applies, and then one individual applies for asylum based on their fear of persecution as a refugee, and the other family members, spouse and children, are derivatively included in that application.
Now, we're a signatory, the U.S., to the 1951 Convention relating to the status of refugees, and under which we agree to consider the claims of those who report being persecuted or endangered in their native countries. Yeah. So are we following our obligations?
No, we're not. And in fact, there's a 1967 protocol to that 1951 convention. It's called the Refugee Protocol, that is in fact the specific treaty that the U.S. signed and ratified. But the definition of a refugee is the same in both treaties, and a very important element of that treaty is Article 33, which is a prohibition on the forced return of individuals to persecution. So asylum, which is giving someone who is a refugee long-term status, legal permanent residency, and pathway to citizenship, is discretionary on the part of states. States do not have to grant asylum, but they may not forcibly return refugees to persecution, which means that we must at least give them protection in the United States and give them access to applying for asylum.
So what's happening now is people, do I understand people are applying for asylum, but they're going through the criminal justice process?
Yes. So under U.S. law, we recognize the definition of a refugee, which is in the Refugee Protocol. We recognize non-refoulement or non-forcible return of individuals to persecution. And we also recognize that we should allow people to apply for asylum regardless of how they enter the country, whether they enter with a visa or not. Most asylum seekers don't have a visa because they're frightened. They leave with their kids in their arms and their clothes on their back. International law and U.S. law recognize people have a right to apply for asylum regardless of their mode of entry. That's Section 208 of our Refugee Act. Now, the problem is that we now criminalize unlawful entry. We have a provision of our criminal code that makes it a misdemeanor to come into the country without a visa. We have another provision of that same law that says that regardless of how a person enters the country, they should be able to apply for asylum. The problem with the zero tolerance policy, which is Sessions and others in the administration saying we are going to prosecute everyone who enters for the first time without a visa, is that those individuals are being processed criminally for their misdemeanor allegations, before they are allowed to apply for asylum. And that violates our own law, Section 208 of the Refugee Act, and it also violates Article 31 of the Refugee Protocol, which says we will not burden people who are refugees because they lack authorization through a visa to enter the country.
And just quickly, like many of us here watching the situation unfold from far away, what would you recommend New Mexicans pay attention to, or questions we could ask in the coming days and weeks?
That's a fabulous, fabulous question.
Real quick.
And what I would say is that we need to honor immigrant families, including refugee families. And we do not have to criminally prosecute everybody who comes into the country without a visa, and we can demand that. We don't prosecute everyone for speeding. We don't prosecute everybody for not paying their parking violations. We don't have to prosecute everybody.
Okay.
And we also do not need to detain families.
Well, Jennifer Moore, we're just starting this conversation. We'll continue following it within the coming weeks. Thank you so much.
Thank
for
you,
talking
Megan.
with us.
Thank you.